I'm here interviewing Sonia Manzano, the author of The Revolution of Evelyn Serrano. Hi, how are you? How are you doing today?
Good.
You went to New York City High School of Performing Arts, where you pursued acting. From there, do you think you really picked up, how to become a writer, or was it something that you've always been interested in?
I didn't start writing until I was on Sesame Street. And then when I was on that show for about 8 years, I wanted to contribute more to the show, and I felt I had done all I could as an actress, and that's when I started writing.
You joined the cast of Sesame Street in 1971. Do you feel that was what influenced, your love for education, or?
I don't think that it was education I was interested in. I was interested in how young kids perceive the world. And I was really interested in how young kids from other cultures perceive the world. And Sesame Street was interested in that. And I found that, it was a good match. I could help them do that.
What was it like interacting with the puppets on Sesame Street, like Big Bird and Elmo's?
Well, first it was very nerve-wracking. It was, I would talk to Grover, and I wasn't used to speaking to a puppet. They're very simply made. They're just ping pong balls on a furry sock. And I would always look down at the puppeteer until Grover said to me, "Stop looking at that man down there and look at me," in his Grover voice. It's stupid of me to try to do that voice, but I realized I shouldn't look down. I should look right at the puppeteer, and that's how I began to become comfortable with them. They're very real, and it's very easy to believe in them wholeheartedly.
Picture that. In your latest novel, The Revolution of Evelyn Serrano, Evelyn is such a powerful character. Do you feel that where we come from really influences the characters in our stories?
I think everything that's in your life inspires anything that you write. When I write for Ernie and Bert or Big Bird, it's usually based on something that really happened to me in my life. You would think, what could have happened to Sonia Manzano that Big Bird will go through? But I do find parallels. So I think that all your life experiences go into whatever you decide to write.
How did your upbringing really, influence the characters in this book?
Oh, the Evelyn Serrano, quite a bit. I remember being very self-conscious about being Puerto Rican, and more so because I was born in this country, and other people were able to say, well, I was born in Puerto Rico, and I had to give them a long story. Well, my mother and my father are from Puerto Rico, but I was born here, yada, 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 yada. I had to explain myself. So I was very self-conscious about being Puerto Rican until I grew a little bit older. And I learned more about myself. So I wanted to capture that feeling in Evelyn Serrano, that she's self-conscious about being Puerto Rican in 1969, and she doesn't know where to fit in. Certainly everybody at that age struggles with fitting in, but more so in a culture that doesn't reflect you. And at that time, there were no Latin people on television or in the movies, and there were hardly any books about Latin people as well.
How has being a woman affected your work and creating this novel?
Well, I think I am a woman, so it's hard for me to write like a man. I mean, that's, if you were a horse that was writing, you'd write like a horse, I mean, it sort of doesn't, like I said, whatever you are is what fuels the writing that you do, no matter what gender.
So how do you feel do you feel writing can be used as a social tool?
Absolutely, and I have to say that I learned that on Sesame Street. They were a show in 1969, like I said, there were no people of color on television, that wanted to change society by showing a diverse society. And that's why they cast me, and then I realized, I could help these people, because they wanted to show Puerto Ricans as they were, and I had all that information. So I could be it. And then 8 years later, I began to write it for them, too.
Do you think that we should encourage the next generation to sort of accept their culture? Because it feels like a lot of children in this generation are forgetting their heritage.
I think that once you see your culture realized and expressed beautifully, you are more willing to embrace it. When I saw West Side Story, the movie, and I saw those beautiful schoolyards and what looked so beautiful in the movie, all of a sudden I felt, oh, isn't it great to be Puerto Rican? Look at this. The schoolyards we hang out in are gorgeous. You know, the rooftops that we sing on are beautiful. And who would have thought that the fire escape that I sit on every day is really a place of love? So that was an expression of a culture that made it beautiful, and writing does the same thing.
So, do you think that the youth now, that they're increasingly forgetting about their culture, or starting to assimilate with what American society wants?
I think everybody does that. Like I said, everybody wants to fit in at 14 and 15 especially. But once you get a little older, you realize it's not so important to fit in and be exactly like everybody else. And I think then you start realizing who you are and embracing your culture more.
You're such a prolific writer. Do you feel that people are born, authors or artists, or is that something that we develop as we go along?
I think that we're all born with both. A little artistry and a little not, science, the left part of the brain and the right part of the brain. But I think some people are born with more of it, more artistry, and I think you will have to develop it to make it grow. I was in the elevator once and I was talking to an accountant, and you think, well, what's artistic about that guy? But he was saying that he found a certain beauty in numbers. And I thought, wow, he has an artistic kind of flair. Not enough to be an artist, but he sees artistry in numbers. I have a very artistic dentist, and not always. So I think there's artistry, and a little artistry in all of us, and we could either make it grow and nurture it or not.
As a woman and a mentor yourself, do you feel that there's any advice you can give, young women authors?
I think you should write every day. Here's something that I learned. I thought I'll think it first, and after I think it all out, the whole story, then I'll write it down. Don't do that. Don't do that. The actual act of writing it will make it come out of your brain. When you ask people for advice, listen to what they say, because that's how you'll have clues as to whether you've accomplished what you've set out to do. You could write a tragedy about how nobody showed up for your sweet 16th birthday party, and you want it to be a tragedy, but if the person who reads it says, what a hilarious story that was, well, then maybe I didn't exactly tell it the way I meant to, because they got a whole different impression of it. And certainly, I have to say this, and I'm still struggling with this, the mechanics of writing is, you should try to, and everyone should try to master the mechanics of writing. It really is, grammar seems so boring and punctuation seems so boring, but it really, if you think of it as notes, as if it was musical notes, and it guides the reader as to what they're supposed to be getting from this organization of words, that helps.
Feel that with everything you just said, like what I'm getting from this, do you think that one of the big lessons is being faithful to your roots, but also love what you do? If you don't love to write, there's no reason to write, really. I mean, I'm assuming that all the writers who attempt it really, really love to write, and they should write from themselves, and that will steer them certainly towards their roots. Well, thank you very much for coming out to Girls Right Now. It's a pleasure meeting you. Happy to talk to Girls Right Now anytime.